unitedlatinas.com/membership, and we will get you in. We have so many opportunities. Our goal is to make sure that we amplify the voices of women, the voices of Latinas and allies, because that is our core mission. We want to see more women being able to execute their voice, y lo que sale, right? Like whatever is pulling at your heart to say, man, I have a message to share, and I feel it's important that other people hear it. We want you to connect with us because we want to be part of that energy. We know that you have big things to do. So that is it. I was the first 2 hours, guys. I'm going to lay low in the cut, and I'm going to be in the chat for now. So take over.
Awesome, Lisette, Adriana, and I'm so happy to be in this conversation with the three of you. Let's just get right into it. This conversation is about how do we dominate the corporate ladder? And I was debating on the word dominate because it feels a little strong, but that's what we're here to do today. It's about to dominate the world. So we're going to dominate the corporate ladder. I know that the three of you have in your different careers. So I want to kick it off to Adriana, if you want to start us off with just chatting a little bit about the narrative, how it felt for you, and then this is really a conversation. Everybody else can jump in.
Absolutely. I mean, this is great. Thank you so much, Ileana and Sandra, for this opportunity. It's an honor, really. And following up from all this, magical energy that, you have been creating, all this momentum, I think is just very, very empowering. So I would say coming from the corporate world, it is really interesting what's really happening there. I think that more than ever, diversity, engagement, and inclusiveness are a super agenda in that world. And I think that it's because it's good business. I mean, you think about the corporate world, and the corporate world is about return on investment, right? And I would say Latinos are basically the fastest growing segment of the population. $1.8 trillion in spending, just right now. $1 trillion. It's just amazing. The power is incredible. But also, there's a study about McKinsey that has actually released information that says that the companies that have gender diversity are more likely to have above average profitability than companies that do not promote diversity. And if you talk about ethnic diversity, the number even improves more, is 36% better. So, I mean, if you take a look at all the numbers, all the statistics, it just makes sense. Further, Latinos are representing right now 20% of population, right? And they're projecting to represent 29% by 2050. One household of 3 in the United States, it's going to be, of course, a Latino household. When you put all this together and being in the corporate world, it just makes sense, right? It just makes sense to be able to capitalize on that. And then you see the D&I efforts, really happening. But there you see kind of 2 worlds. One, which is an intentional DE&I agenda, where the companies are really committed to driving the change, where there is quotas. And I know people hate that name, but actually that word is powerful because it's the only way to change. If you don't measure things, you will never be able to improve on them. So you have to have numbers. You have to know what's your mix of population. You have to know whether you're being fair in actually giving opportunity, in this particular case, to Latinas. But there's another world where they use the D&I word and nothing is happening. So I think that we have to be very cognizant of those 2 words. And as Latinas, we have to also make sure that when we choose company A or company B, we are really going to the right place, where we know we're going to be able to have a career, where we know they're doing things to change. Because if you go to the other side, the likelihood is you're going to be against the world. And that is not, I don't think that's fair. And it's even worth wasting your time in that sense. I also think, Ileana, that we are living in a world of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I think that what we can bring to companies in the corporate world, it's precisely a master's in how to manage that environment. We grew up in a world which is in constant change, inflation, devaluations, political uncertainty, etc. And those skills are crucial today. And we Latinas have it. We know how to maneuver in that world. And so I think that is something that we have to really use to play the game. So, I mean, I would like to kick it off like that. I'm pretty sure my Lisette and Anne, also have views on that.
Go ahead, Anne. I know that you have a lot of metrics, and then Lisette.
No, it's a pleasure to be here today. I feel the power and it is amazing. So thank you for having me and thank you for sharing this time together. Well, I want to just roll back to what you said at the very beginning, which is it's really not about dominating, it's about influencing, right? Because what you really want to do in an endeavor, whether it's an endeavor within corporate, within public, nonprofits or government, what you really want to do is you want to show your value and influence. So how to do that is really the question. And you're right, maybe it's my legal background, but I always start with data. If you're going to make the case for something, not only what you want to do, but for your value and what you add to it, you start with data. We've been talking a lot about data related to the Latino community. You also think about data related to representation. So if you can come to the table with benchmarks of availability for our community and jobs that the company hires for, then that should be the goal. The goal would be to get your fair share of that talent. If you come to the table with, the business case for inclusion, the idea that companies that are doing diversity, equity, and inclusion well are doing better. They're growing, they're innovating, and they're carving out a path for the future better than their peers. So that's the case you have to make. And then, a wise Latina recently told me, and I think she's on the call today, Patricia, is, what's standing in your way for whatever it is that you want to get done, whether it's, advancing and developing yourself or advancing and developing a platform, a strategy. So asking yourself what's getting in your way. And if what's getting in your way is what was recently just said in the last discussion, access, then how can you break the barriers to that access? Is it going to someone to be your champion who's at the table that you're not at? Is it finding a way around the barrier to access? But one really important question you have to ask yourself, are you getting in your way? Are you limiting yourself? Because that's something I've struggled with throughout my career is, why am I not owning this? Why am I waiting for permission? Why am I waiting for someone to recognize? I should be my own best advocate instead of my own biggest critic. And I have to tell myself that often.
I think that's so powerful. And Lisette, I want to pass it on to you because you have both perspectives, not only from being in corporate, but also now, advocating for women and to get to those leadership positions through your HR agency. So off to you. Oh, you're on mute.
I was unmuted and then I muted myself. Okay, so it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Ileana, Adriana, Anne. It's so great to be here with you. I couldn't agree more. I think this is a very exciting time, in terms of diversity and inclusion. And, following on with Anne's comments and statistics, I'm going to share with you two numbers. Did you know that 63% of the diversity, equity, and inclusion roles have been created in the past 2 or 3 years? So that's, to me, it's amazing. It's a great investment from corporations to really wanting to walk the talk. And I must say that we are not there yet, but there's been significant strides to get there. And also, in that same rhetoric, did you know that 52% of Latinas say that their professional goal is to get to the top of their profession? So this is a beautiful combination because the layout is being set and we want to get there. So we want to, take all the resources and the opportunities that, corporations are bringing to the table, probably, little by little, but the opportunities are going to be there if they're not there yet. And the other thing that we need to understand is that diversity and inclusion and Latinos taking a seat at the table, it's not about philanthropy anymore. And corporations are understanding that. This is about opportunity for growth for every corporation. Latinos are the third, US Latinos, the third fastest growing economy in the world, just behind India and China. So who in the right, mindset wouldn't want to, approach that market and being loved by Latinos, because Latinos are very powerful consumer, and they will give you their love, their money. They really see themselves represented out there. So I think, all of these things that are happening in the narrative, out there in corporate America are really, really great news for us as Latinas to get our seat at the table. And, just building on what Anne and Adriana said, we need to get much better in using our voice, and letting leaders and people tell that we have more gas in the tank to do things, because, it seems like Latinos were always happy at our jobs. And that sometimes can be misinterpreted like we're happy doing what we do and that we can stay 15, 20 years doing the same. So we have to be very vocal about saying, hey, I'm super happy here, but I have more gas in the tank. I want to do more. I want to achieve more. So help me, get to those places. So it is a very exciting time, I think, for us as Latinas and the strides we're seeing in corporations.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, the majority of our audience are Latinas in different parts and different journeys of their career and their professional. And I think one of the things that I keep hearing again and again in the chat and in many other places is how do we elevate our voice, right? How do we elevate to be heard in the corporate space without losing our authenticity? And I've lived through this myself as well, where you are supposed to be a certain way, where you're supposed to speak a certain way, where you're supposed to, go sometimes even against who we believe we are. And that becomes sort of like this, how do we step up and speak, but still remain us? Any insights, any thoughts?
Well, I can just start by saying, in a recent conversation about the lack of representation of Hispanic Latinos on corporate boards, one of the skills that we need to build, connecting, very important. We're talking a lot about that here today. Networking, very important. I would say what we need to hone is advocating for ourselves, for our community, for others. So to be an advocate for that representation in whatever leadership position it is. And yes, there are stereotypes, there are all kinds of biases people have about our community and Latinas in general. But overcoming those with your own excellence is the best way to turn off those stereotypes. And then once you overcome those, you have that, we also need to hone our advocacy skills for what would be equitable representation in all levels, to include the top levels. And if we know that companies' decision-making in general are better with diverse decision makers, including the Hispanic Latino community, then of course, having that equity is beneficial for all, for our community, but for the greater good. So, I think that, moving away from the kind of circling the drain discussion about the stereotypes against us or bias against our community, rising above that to a level of excellence, and then, insisting upon what others have insisted upon as a civil right, a human right, and that is equity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any other thoughts on how can we advocate for ourselves? And I love what you're saying, and it's at all levels, right? This is not just at the entry level, but also in C-suite levels. It happens all the time.
Yes, Ileana and Lisette, I do think that one of the things that I've seen throughout my career is that we Latinas cannot wait for the opportunity to come to us. We have to create the opportunity. When we hear all the amazing stories from all, the prior Latinas that beautifully presented, it's exactly the same story, right? It's just they created their own opportunity. And I think we're talking about that. And as I mentioned in my book, also in the book, sorry, we all Latinas need to have a dream. I think that we need to know who we want to be, who do we want to become. And I think that the best advice that I ever had early in my career was when someone asked me, what do you want to be in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years? Do you have a plan to get there? And that has been probably one of the most powerful questions throughout my career, because even today, I have exactly the same question. I haven't gotten to where I want to get. I still have, I still want to do many things. I want to contribute with the community more. There's so many things right in the map, but we really need to make sure that we early in the career, we know. And even if we don't know, we put together a plan. And then there's going to be the tours. We're going to learn new things and be ready to actually learn, to be very aggressive about, how you polish yourself, how you present yourself, how do you actually create impact, create value? Because in the end, in the corporate world, it's all about creating value. It's all about really delivering results. So you have to be that, you have to be focused on that. And once you do it, I think it's a lot easier because everybody wants to have people that deliver results in their teams. So it's going to be a lot easier to be welcome in that environment. So that has to do with your own opportunity. Think about, I want that job. I want that position. What do I need to do? What skills I have today that I have to keep on building? What skills I don't have that I have to develop? Talk to your supervisor, right? And do the research yourself. I was reading. Now, if you look at, the coders, like the younger generations, what they're doing, there's no path for that. It's basically self-development. And I think that if we take that as well ourselves, it's also about self-development. What do I need to do better? What do I need to learn? And then go find that knowledge somewhere. I mean, there's so many platforms, learning platforms today that you can access, virtually and, with people. I think that is one thing. The other thing I have to say is that when we talk about inclusion, we have to do it both ways, right? Building your Latino community is critical, but equally important is going to be to build your non-Latino community, because most likely, whom are you going to have at the top in the organizations today? There's going to be very few Latinos or Latinas. So you will need to, your career depends most likely on somebody that is not in your circle. So build your network outside your circle. Very early in my career, like when I was more or less a middle manager, I really started to see that I needed to know people in other functions, people in other levels. And I started to create an agenda myself of having lunch with all those people. And it became a routine. And what that did, basically, it helped me understand the company better. It helped me understand how people were thinking, the functions and everything. But most importantly, I think I put myself on the map. I was no longer a name nobody knew. People knew who I was because we had been together. I had an opportunity to share ideas, so they knew me. And that made it a lot easier to be able to move forward. So the third point, I would say, it's about sponsoring, right? Sponsoring is critical. And I think there's a point, Ileana, that you wanted to cover about sponsoring. So we're ready when you tell us.
Well, we're running out of time. This is such an incredible, but Lisette, up to you, and maybe you can take on sponsoring.
Exactly. I was just going to jump in on that conversation. Yeah, I cannot stress enough how important it is to have sponsors and mentors and understand the difference between them. A mentor is going to show you the way. It's going to tell, there's this door, this opportunity, go get it. And a sponsor is actually opening that door for you. That is the difference. And you need to understand the difference. So look around in your corporations and see, which leaders, are standing out for being great sponsors. Get yourself a mentor, and that mentor can become a sponsor, in the long run. So you have to make sure that you have mentors and sponsors around you, and also make sure you participate on the ERGs groups in your corporation. That is another great way, to do things. If there's not an ERG, raise your hand and start building the ERG, for Hispanics and Latinos in your organization. So there's many things that we can do, but let's take this moment together and keep building, momentum for Latinas.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And for example, Jasmine on the chat is saying that she's been wanting to get on a corporate board for a very long time. And I think that's true for many Latinas and just women in general, right? Like representation goes across and all different things. And it goes back to a lot of what all of you have said about the building your network. Because a lot of those jobs and a lot of those positions are really about who do you know and who can advocate for you, who can talk about you when you're not in the room, so that then your name comes up and then they can know. And any final words from the three of you?
Just make sure you incorporate. You don't struggle with having one foot on corporate America and one foot on your heritage. Blend them together, and that's where the magic happens. Embrace both and just bring your best self out there.
We are powerful. We are power. We are powerful. And all we need to do is use that power and not be afraid of it. And, leverage this community. I think this is a fantastic, incredible community. Leverage this.
And then finally, I would just say, back to my point about advocacy, we have to move to a space where we're empowered to expect equity at all levels, not only for our community, but for the advancement of our society. So be an advocate, be a sponsor, and be a mentor. And do that not only within our community, but with others.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I know that we have a lot of more to talk about. So I believe that we owe it to ourselves to continue this conversation in another space that we'll make sure to invite everybody in, because I think there's a lot that we can continue to learn from each other, to connect from each other, experiences that the three of you have that are very valuable for this community. So thank you again for your time. Thank you for sharing your stories in the book, because the three of you are authors in the book on this year's volume. And thank you for sharing your thoughts about how are we going to dominate the corporate ladder. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Adriana. Thank you, Lisette.
Thank you, everyone, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.